I almost ended my hiatus early after watching Jane Campion's 2021 cerebral western, The Power of the Dog. This ensemble flick took subtle storytelling to a mesmerizing degree, and I was thrilled to watch it again. And considering the ensemble focus, the term protagonist will refer to the dynamic and direction of all the characters as a whole. I've dedicated hundreds of hours to this channel so far, and I find it supremely encouraging that I'm still nerding out over amazing films. And it feels like enough of a flex to make this my favorite breakdown out of 70 videos and counting. The timestamps for every sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start as always with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. Brothers Phil and George operate a ranch together, though with a silent distance between them, while the grief of ex-lover Bronco Henry haunts Phil to the point of possessiveness. And Peter and Rose make ends meet by running an inn for traveling folk. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonists exist in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Peter lacks a father, and Rose a husband, in this unforgiving and old-timey patriarchy, and George rejects the hero worship of Bronco Henry that the rest of the ranch adheres to. Then both worlds collide, as the cattle drive places our ensemble misfits in the same room. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. Phil sees Peter, who reminds him of himself before Bronco Henry entered his life, which leads us to examine the effects of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and what remains the same. Phil rejects the effeminate Peter and his non-rugged upbringing. Then he expands on the testosterone-soaked legend of Bronco Henry, and George comforts a fellow injured party of Phil's reckless behavior. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Phil demonstrates his possessiveness of George, though more as a memory of Bronco Henry than as a brother. Then a new wedge divides them further, as George seeks out Rose's company. Next, our characters dedicate their effort to a specified goal, and this is always narrower in scope than what the third act will demand. Phil holds on to the teachings and legacy of his fallen lover, no matter how fleeting or trivial, while George moves on by making a play for Rose's affections. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. The memory of Bronco Henry that haunts the ranch, Phil's jealous hatred of Rose and moving on in general, the duties and trappings of the ranching lifestyle, and of course, Phil's bitter games and retaliations. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. George reveals that he married Rose in secret, further removing Phil from his private life. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they discover the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Phil's mental and emotional deterioration is on full display as he beats a terrified horse. Peter attends school, following in his dead father's medical footsteps, while George and Rose take their first few steps as a married couple. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat rather than internal or emotional. Rose settles into her new home with all the charm she can muster. Phil communicates his hatred of Rose, the one emotion he can actually admit to, then finds serene relief in the company of the Bronco Henry saddle. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Phil recedes into partial hiding, a safe area away from the problems he's not dealing with. Rose fights against loneliness by blurring the lines of social etiquette. Then George's gift threatens to destabilize even worse her existence in the home. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Rose practices the piano, displaying some ability, while Phil mocks her timid attempts with his banjo and shows Rose what kind of musical talent the family is already used to. Then he faces the prospect of a bath, the scrubbing away of manly smells. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story, which they've gathered and learned so far. Rose withers as the mere mention of Phil upstages her in her own home, while Phil rejects even his parents and the governor in exchange for remaining as close as possible to Bronco Henry. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements of the first act are used to gauge their progress. The Act 1 player piano burns Rose, as parts of her backstory don't hold up, and Phil's Act 1 humiliation returns, though now it's in front of a more sophisticated crowd. Then Rose's Act 1 alcohol ban is repealed, so she can find some manner of peace, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Peter takes a holiday from school in the city, who stated in the opening narration that a real man protected his mother, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. Phil targets Peter for more abuse against this effeminate presence, while Peter cares for Rose and soon recognizes the same alcoholic path as his father. Next, our characters complete their narrow scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless and must complete a wider scope objective. Rose finds acceptance within the house, but it's only with the paid housekeepers and not yet family. Peter proves himself cold to death and morbidity, but killing a bunny isn't the same as killing a man. Phil uncovers the drinking problem, but he needs to help her deteriorate further so everyone else notices too. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self and identity or their physical journey. Phil thinks everyone is preoccupied enough to fully immerse himself in his Bronco Henry fantasy, but curious Peter uncovers the secret hideaway and evidence of Phil's erotic side. Then an exposed Phil reaches out to Peter as a mentor rather than an adversary. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Peter takes to his new mentor as a father figure he no longer has. Then Phil is genuinely impressed with his new protege, who demonstrates a prodigious eye for everything Bronco Henry taught. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss, and this is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Isolation and alcoholism drag down Rose into a shell of her former self. Then Phil's aggravation pushes Peter too fast, and the return to humiliation stings. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. Peter rides alone, using the skills taught by Phil, which were taught by Bronco Henry. The diseased cow presents an opportunity for autopsy and revenge, while Rose loses control over herself and Peter, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Phil rides off alone with Peter, recreating the mentorship from Bronco Henry's perspective. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the wider scope objective. Phil hints at the parallels between his protege and Bronco Henry, but then is startled by how casually Peter kills an animal. Rose's undeniable alcoholism and its root cause haunts Peter, who explains the parallels between her path and his father's suicide. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Rose finally strikes at Phil by giving away his beloved cowhides. Then her deterioration culminates into life-threatening conditions. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Phil rages about the hides, not dealing well at all with a missing aspect of Bronco Henry, while he talks reckless about Rose to Peter, pushing his protege to choose. And George makes it very clear that he's no longer under the umbrella of Bronco Henry either. Then Peter offers Phil the tainted cowhide, gaining his trust and affection, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Peter allows Phil to soak his wounded hands into anthrax-infected water. Rose is now protected because Phil is a dead man. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Phil finishes the rope, while Peter watches without remorse, and the unspoken romance with Bronco Henry is as close to confirmed as it needs to be, hinting to the future Peter chose against. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. The ranch hands and house staff move along their duties as always. Rose continues to hide from the presence of Phil, even as he's rendered defenseless, while Peter waits for word that the pattern of toxic masculinity has indeed been broken. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Phil's reputation is nearly legendary at his own funeral, where Mrs. Burbank accepts Rose into the family. Then Peter reflects on the morality of his kill, as his mother's life and everyone else affected by Phil infinitely improves. And there you have it. Jane Campion's 2021 Western drama, The Power of the Dog, adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way. And it proves that trusting your audience to be smart is always the best option. Now, let's move on from a cowboy's tale here on Earth to a cowboy's tale out in the verse, with a deep dive into our introduction to the crew of Serenity. Join me next time for Joss Whedon's 2002 sci-fi western, The Firefly pilot episode. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.